Hello, my name. Ow! What the fuck? Sorry, wrong channel. Hello, everybody. My name is Dylan, and I think too much. Around mid-2022, I began keeping a detailed spreadsheet of all of the video games that I was playing. Not for any content reasons, just because I'm a dork, and it's something I still keep up to this day. Recently, I even cranked up the Dorkinator to warp speed and began taking detailed, structured notes about all the games I was playing as well. Mostly just so I had a space to expel the aforementioned myriad thoughts that are constantly swimming around inside my head, and so I figured, fuck it, I'll put my opinions on the internet. That's never gone poorly for anybody. These will not be objective reviews of any of these games. If you're just looking for a shitty checklist of all the game's features, then you can go hit up Joe Schmo in the Steam reviews, because that's not what I'm doing here. Okay, so the content in this game is a 7, gameplay is only a 5, graphics are a 7. Oh wow, only a 2 out of 10. It's very linear with no choices. Okay. This is a review for mouthwashing. Mouthwashing is a 7 because it lacks interesting gameplay. Oh my god. I'm gonna be using my own subjective experiences playing these games and talk about my own personal enjoyment and my own personal opinions. Frankly, I don't really care if something I enjoy is objectively bad or something I don't enjoy is objectively good. I am objectively the one making this fucking video. Besides, I'm one of those hippie dweebs who believes that objectivity isn't really a thing in art. I spent way too many hours worrying about if games like Dark Souls or Tears of the Kingdom should be considered 10 out of 10, because they do have a lot of flaws with them that I did notice on my playthroughs, but I also enjoyed them to such an extreme degree that those flaws sort of fade into the background. My take is who gives a shit. There will never be a perfect video game. In fact, striving for perfection in any art form can often push you more towards mid than it does towards masterpiece. So basically, I'm just gonna talk about all the games I played in May. I'm not gonna give them any number scores or letter grades. I have a lot to say about some of these games and not as much to say about others. So anyways, enough yapping. Let's get to the fucking... It had been many months since I heard the call of democracy, but by invading Super Earth, the Illuminate scum had awoken me from my stupor, and once more I must put my life on the line to uphold our way of life and defend democracy from the squids. I've been playing Helldivers II on and off since it came out in early 2024, and I know I'll stop playing it again at some point relatively soon, but the foundation of this game is so rock solid that I know I'll be back whenever new content gets added, or just when I get the itch to play. It's one of those games that I feel like I'm going to be returning to for many years, assuming the servers are still online for that long. Guys, please add local split screen co-op offline Helldivers. For the love of God. Regardless, it always feels very viscerally satisfying to step back into the shoes of a Helldiver. Frankly, blowing chunks off of the... what are they called? The Terminids? What are they called again? Frankly, blowing chunks off of the Terminids and the automatons and now the Illuminate is something that I don't think will ever get old. It is a game that I feel like is timeless, and that is especially due to the fact that it derives so much of its entertainment value from co-op. And unlike many of its live service peers, it's not trying to constantly exploit FOMO to get you to keep playing even when you've been burnt out for 2 seasons at this point. This is a message to anyone who's still playing any of the following games listed on screen. You can stop whenever you want. Upon my return to defending democracy, I have been having a fucking blast with the new Super Earth missions. It's a great shake-up of the familiar formula, juxtaposing the wide-open barren wastelands of the bug missions and the swampy trenches of the automatons with a staggering amount of human-looking architecture. And said daunting architecture provides a perfect backdrop to all of the new squid killing fun. Shout out to the Helldivers II art team for kind of perfectly capturing exactly what I would expect a city in Super Earth to look like. With the new update, this game has honestly never felt more like a PTSD simulator than it does now. And I was there for Malevolent Creek, man. I was there. Hold on, pause for dog.
Greetings!
The core gameplay is just as fun and varied and satisfying as it's always been, but to me, what has always been Helldivers 2's strongest element is its presentation. Whenever someone uses the descriptor cinematic to describe a video game, I think of something like Helldivers 2. To me, a cinematic game isn't one that wrestles the control from the player at every point to show off a cool cutscene, or use mocap to capture an Oscar bait-worthy performance. Not to say that those games are bad, but when I think of something cinematic, I'm thinking of shit like this. Trying to make your video game less like a video game and then marketing that as a selling point is pretty fucking stupid to me, and it always has been. And Helldivers 2 is just kind of definitive proof that you don't have to do those things in order for your game to feel cinematic. All of these moments aren't just awe-inspiring, but they also allow active participation from the player. They don't just take control away from you so that your character can do something really cool. You get to be the one to do it. I'm glad that this game keeps getting new updates and sees continued support, and I hope it doesn't meet the fate of other live service games. It really is absolute cinema. So I don't think they made physical copies of these games, so I'm just going to use this one because it has the word "we" in it. The We Were Here franchise is one that I truly adore, or at the very least, it produced two games that I absolutely adore. Unfortunately, they aren't these ones. However, replaying the first two games of the franchise, it's just given me a deeper appreciation for the evolution of the series. The saga perfectly documents the developers at Total Mayhem mastering this specific format. For the uninitiated, that format is two-player co-op puzzle solving that heavily relies on exchanging information quickly, effectively, and oftentimes under pressure. My buddy Sal and I played these games back in 2020, or at least the ones that were out at the time, and we've continued to stay up to date with the series as new entries continue to release. Despite this, however, like I imagine many of you in the audience, barely fucking remember anything from the years 2020 to 2022. So, you know, at least that means I get to experience these puzzles again, I guess. That's cool. Thank you, trauma. That being said, despite the repressed memories, I still had at least vague familiarity with pretty much every puzzle in this game. Or these games, sorry. I forgot that I'm lumping We Were Here and We Were Here 2 into the same category. Man. I guess Winston's just gonna stare at me while I read this script now. We replayed the first game back in early May, and much like the first sequel, it is a very short and simple puzzle game. It focuses on relatively smaller scale puzzles and derives pretty much all of its replay value from this binary choice between which side you're gonna play on at the start. And while I do think We Were Here holds up quite well, I can't say the same for 2. And that's TOO. These aren't awful games by any means. However, having seen where the franchise goes, I can tell that these are very primitive entries. Which, and let me be clear about this, is fine. I'm not saying that these games are completely pointless or that they suck or that the developers should feel bad about these decisions. However, revisiting them after seeing the highs of the later entries kind of just makes these ones fall a little flat for me. A lot of the puzzles kind of felt like they could just be circumvented if you were screen sharing with your partner, which to the uninitiated, it may sound like every puzzle could be solved that way. However, at their best, these puzzles often involve another layer of deduction or reasoning that the players have to do. It's not just about exchanging information, it's about how you use that information. I'm trying not to go into specifics here because I want to keep these videos as spoiler-free as possible, and describing any of the puzzles in great detail would kind of defeat the point of playing these games. And I do think that they're worth playing, if only because they provide a great precursor to the later entries that are quite excellent. And you get to see the evolution of the skill set of the developers as you play, and I think that's really cool. It does require you to have one friend though, and I know that that's a hurdle that not many gamers can overcome. I think the whole franchise is worth playing, if only for the later entries being so great, and these first two games are so short that you can blitz through them relatively quickly and really get to the juicy stuff. I think We Were Here 2 is likely the low point in the franchise, but Sal and I do continue on playing through the rest of the franchise as well, so I'll probably be talking about those other games relatively soon. So I know I literally just said that I think 2 might be the low point of the franchise, but The Friendship is a miniature game that contains 3 high score based puzzles that didn't make the cut for the main We Were Here franchise. And frankly, I can see why. Let me just start by saying I don't hate this game. It's still dripping with the charm and personality that the rest of the franchise has in spades. Bee boo boo bop.
Hanzo.
And honestly, 2 of the 3 puzzles are actually pretty fun. However, the second puzzle is so atrocious that it kind of drags down my opinion of the rest of the game as well. The way these games communicate information about puzzles has always been hit or miss, especially as the franchise continues and the puzzles get harder and more complex. Minor spoilers for the friendship ahead, but nothing super game-breaking, no solutions or anything like that. In this puzzle, there is information communicated to the player in myriad ways, but one of those ways is with paintings on the walls of either side of you. Scoring points is probably the easiest part of this puzzle to understand, so my friend and I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out what these symbols on the wall corresponding to these numbers could possibly mean. And all it was explaining how to score points. So that was a lot of fun. Again, maybe skill issue on our part, but I don't know, hot take. If you're communicating information about your puzzle so poorly that you can attempt it 4 times and still be operating under the completely wrong rule set, there might be a problem. Okay, so I have to connect. Oh, well, it's just kind of over unless I get a piece that has a green and a red, and I didn't. Like I said previously, the puzzles in this game are high score based, and so going for gold is sort of the completionist method. And while going for gold on the other 2 puzzles was a pretty good time, it wasn't a good enough time to justify ever coming back to this game ever again. Though much like the first 2 games, if you're going to play the franchise, this is just more of it, and even at its worst, it's still a relatively enjoyable time. It's just now there's no reason to really ever go back to it ever again. There's plenty of other co-op games out there. Speaking of which, I don't own this one physically either. I got the idea to do the physical games for Helldivers, and then I kind of just slowly realized I don't own most of these games physically. The first Forest game is one that I beat with a group of friends back in 2023, and we had such a good time with it that when the sequel released in early access, we hopped on it pretty much as soon as possible. Unfortunately, by early access, what the developers actually meant was missing 80% of the content, and what is there is stitched together so poorly that it is a completely confusing and utterly incomprehensible mess, in which you may just stumble into the final boss arena and beat the game without even realizing. But that won't fit on the Steam store page, so I suppose early access will do just fine. Needless to say, it wasn't a great experience, so we decided that we were going to wait for the full game to release before returning to it and giving it a fair shake. And now that it's finished, it's pretty okay. To start with what I think is the best part of this game, the visuals are kind of just fucking unbelievable. The lighting effects combined with the overall visual fidelity can create some of the most awe-inspiring landscapes I've ever seen in a game. It's not like there's anything super distinct in the environment. It's your typical forests and beaches and snowy mountain areas. Man, when it's bathed in that golden hour sunlight or a beautiful sunrise or the darkness of the moonlight, it can be incredibly breathtaking. I can't even count on all of my appendages how many times I had to kind of just stop, look around, and go, whoa.
Ah, what a lovely morning. Let me go sit on my flesh couch.
Yeah, you might have forgotten, but this is a horror game. To be fair, I probably would have been a lot more afraid if I wasn't constantly goofing off with 3 of my buddies. And the bulk of the heavy lifting towards that horrific atmosphere is done by the visuals and specifically the lighting. How is there not a photo mode in this game? I want to take pictures of this. This is fucking unbelievable. Put like a camera in it, like Firewatch, or just like add photo mode. Are you kidding? Like, I want to take pictures of this. The building system is okay. It is quite a bit more robust and extensive than the one in the first game, that's for sure. I didn't really touch the building mechanics much. I kind of just left that to the other gamers, and that's pretty uncharacteristic of me. Usually when there's a building system or some other way to, you know, cosmetically affect the world, I'm all over that shit. I spend more time playing a lot of RPGs just deciding what color I want my armor to be than I do actually engaging with the combat. There are quite a bit of outfits in this game, and I think those are fun, and I also like playing dress up with Virginia, which I did quite often. But I think what ultimately contributed to my unusual lack of enthusiasm for the building mechanics was just clunkiness. Some of my favorite games of all time are clunky as shit. I understand that that's not necessarily the end-all be-all to a game's quality. However, it reaches a certain point in Sons of the Forest where it is impossible to ignore, and it has serious negative ramifications on my enjoyment of engaging with the building system. And on top of that, it's just a grind to collect all of the building materials that you need for things. Having to run back and forth with a log sled over and over again just to build even the most simple of house frames is kind of annoying, frankly. Your character never gains the ability to carry more than 2 logs at a time, so I often found myself way more excited to get back to exploring or fighting than I was to just stay at camp and, you know, try to contribute to the building in some capacity. In terms of actually using the custom building framework that you can do, we only built 1 house out of it, and then everything else was just pre-built blueprints anyways. So while the building system is definitely extensive, it also just feels kind of pointless to engage with any of those mechanics. Especially when trying to get a log to face the way you want it to feels like doing one of those fucking heavy rain QuickTime events where you have to hold the buttons all weird so you don't, like, electrocute yourself or whatever. There are just too many things getting in the way of my enjoyment of using these mechanics, to the point that I didn't even bother after a certain point. It was too unwieldy and difficult to get it to do what I wanted. Funnily enough, the same thing can also be said of just controlling the player character. Permeating throughout the entirety of the game is this uneasy feeling that if you step on a mountain the wrong way, you're gonna fall through the cracks and into one of the gears that keeps the game functioning. Also, sidebar, why some mountain I climb up 90-degree angle, some mountain I cannot walk up small slope? It not make sense, I want answers. And that undertone of being barely held together especially shines through in the traversal mechanics. Which is a real shame, because I think if they realized the potential, these would be some of the best traversal mechanics in gaming. The movement potential here is just off the chart. Between the paragliders and the bounce pads and the one wheels and the golf carts, the zip lines and the grappling hooks and the rebreather and the fins, there is a massive variety of ways to get around, and a lot of them feel quite good when they work. Unfortunately, when they work. Nothing soured my mood quickly than building up a bunch of momentum on a one wheel and then hitting a singular pebble and going flying into the tree in front of me. It becomes obviously apparent just how rigid this game is when you try to build up any amount of speed or momentum on a one wheel or a golf cart. And God forbid you try to chain together 2 different movement techniques at the same time, you might rip a hole in the fabric of space-time. And it seems like even the developers understood that it was a little frustrating to get around the island, because they do give you the ability to fast travel. Only after you beat the game, though. You know, I could have fucking used that. Now, I know that I'm being a little bit negatively skewed here, and to be fair, when the traversal mechanics do work properly, it feels unbelievably satisfying. We built our base on a beach, and so I spent so much time just driving around in circles on the one wheel over there and hitting ramps that were naturally built into the fucking environment and getting air and doing 360s and shooting people in the face with shotguns. When it's given enough open space to truly shine, you can see the potential, which honestly just makes it sting even more. Overall, if I'm ignoring the bugginess and the jank, I think that the traversal mechanics are quite excellent. And frankly, if they continue to patch the game and fix a lot of the jankiness and the other issues I had with it, the traversal could finally reach its true potential. Despite all this negativity though, I actually did have a pretty good time with Sons of the Forest. And that's mostly because I was playing with 3 of my friends. But it's also because at a certain point, I stopped approaching it in the same way I approached the first game. If you approach this game as a wide open cannibal murder sandbox rather than a tense survival crafting horror experience, it actually holds up pretty well. The island is massive and has a lot of varied environments in terms of both visuals and just elevation. It is chock full of cannibals and cultists, as well as the means to explode them. This game bestows upon you an armory that would make Frank Castle fucking quiver in his boots. Not to mention the fact that you can use most of these weapons while you're riding the one wheel. But for some reason, not when you're sitting shotgun in the golf cart. This might be the biggest oversight in the entire game. Genuinely, it fucking blows my mind that when you sit in the passenger seat or the back seat of the golf cart, you can't do anything. You can't look at your mini-map, you can't pull out any weapons, you can't open your inventory, all you get to do is look. I will say, a weapon wheel would do wonders. As it is right now, you only get 10 hotkeys, and for the amount of stuff that they give you, that just isn't nearly enough. It meant I ended up feeling pigeonholed into using the same weapons over and over again, because I literally couldn't hotkey anymore. After a certain point, any new weapons I was finding were going straight to the bottom of my backpack. Not to complain about the weapon variety, I do actually think that that's one of this game's best features. It really helps the whole murder sandbox vibe when you have a billion different ways to blow people up. The game is by far at its best when it acts as more of a vehicle for horrific violence against cannibals than an actual video game with like goals and a plot and characters and, you know, all that dumb beta shit. Real alphas just want to put a sticky bomb on a billionaire.
In the video game Sons of the Forest, in the fictional video game Sons of the Forest, I would like to do this in Sons of the Forest, the video game.
The exploration is way too hand-holdy to feel rewarding in any way. It marks pretty much everything you need to go to on your map, and then when you get there, they will be sure to load you up with way more stuff than you'll need for the incoming encounter. It's unfortunate that exploration is that way, because outside of the traversal mechanics and the aforementioned murder sandbox elements, this game doesn't really have much going for it, unfortunately. I will say that this game, at the very least, is interesting enough to get me to talk about it for this long, and that's worth celebrating in and of itself. Even if I'm disappointed by this game, and I think that it didn't reach its full potential, or that the vibe they were going for is just not the one they succeeded with, whatever. Despite all of that, it was incredibly thought-provoking. Mostly because I think it provides such a visceral example of good ideas that don't realize their full potential. In my book, it's way better to be a bad but thought-provoking game than it is to be a good but boring game. To summarize, if you treat the titular forest in Sons of the Forest like a wide-open murder playground for you and your friends to find creative and fun ways to explode cannibals, then you're gonna have a great fucking time. It's just a fucking shame that a lot of the weakest elements of this game seem to be the ones that they expect you to put the most time and effort into. There is definitely fun to be had, and with continued support from the developers, who knows, maybe they'll fix a lot of the problems I had. But as it is, I just think this is an example of a game that could have been so much more than it actually is. Also, I already mentioned this, but no photo mode is a fucking crime, especially in a game that looks this fucking good. I mean, even Of all of the existing games that attempt to put you into the shoes of a Jedi or equivalent Force user, I think Jedi Fallen Order is the first one that actually, and please forgive me for saying this, made me feel like a Jedi. Outside of maybe Blade and Sorcery with the Outer Rim mod. But that's kind of unfair because that's just VR. I am glad that Respawn understood that outside of just giving you a glowy stick and the ability to like blow up people's pancakes with your minds, you actually have to put people in situations that make them think like a Jedi. The game gives you enough abilities and tools at your disposal that you'll end up strategizing without even thinking about it. It becomes second nature by the end of the game to use all of these tools to the best of their ability to overcome different combat encounters. And these encounters themselves are designed in interesting ways to encourage you to experiment. They don't just increase the number of enemies or the amount of special enemies or the health bars in order to give you additional challenge. Instead, it derives most of its difficulty from the design of the encounters themselves. Stuff like environmental hazards or positioning of enemies is actually incredibly important to how you approach combat. The game is subtly encouraging you to use your Force abilities in tandem with the environment in order to make combat encounters easier, and they do a good job of making it never feel cheap or scripted in a way that would devalue the experience overall. Yes, there are your typical skill trees that you unlock, but very few of the upgrades on them are just strict numbers upgrades. Most of them are new abilities or tools that you can use during combat, and I think that's a super Jedi-coded way to approach improvement in a game like this. I will say that the levels can at times feel a bit restrictive though. They do loop back into themselves in pretty satisfying ways, but at a certain point it does become kind of predictable. The first time that happened, I definitely went, oh, that's cool. It wasn't as impressive by the fifth time. Maybe it's just because my first memory of level design in this capacity is Dark Souls. Honestly, Dark Souls has done that a lot, where it just kind of ruins other games for me because it does things they do but better. Curse you, Dark Souls! You also backtrack a good amount in this game, which isn't really a bad thing. I actually kind of like the way they approach it as well. You'll often return to planets you've already been with new abilities or tools that can help you get to areas you couldn't reach before. And it's a good way to help the player who's familiar with these environments return and feel stronger, despite the fact that they populate them with new combat encounters on occasion. Or I think like 2 unique combat encounters with different names. Wait a minute, giving health bars to regular enemies and then repeating encounters with different names? And there's a swamp level? Miyazaki, you've done it again! Going into Fallen Order, I was aware that it was the first part of a planned trilogy. I've already begun playing Jedi Survivor, and I'm having a fucking blast with it, let me tell you. I understood that because this is the opening to a trilogy, the game was likely going to spend a lot of time laying the groundwork for the remainder of the narrative to play out in the future installments. I think it played its part perfectly. It got me invested in these characters and their place in the wider universe, and now I want to see where it goes next. Cal Kestis is slowly becoming one of my favorite characters in the Star Wars Wars verse. He's easy to root for, he's super sympathetic, he's kind, he's very Jedi coded. This specific moment on Kashyyyk is where I really realized they were nailing his characterization.
We're here to free you. You're not alone.
I don't know, there's just something so touching about this interaction. It is incredibly simple, but it's also very powerful, and I think just does a very excellent job at showing you the kind of Jedi that Cal Kestis wants to be. By the end of the game, you also, as a player, begin to question the quest that you've been on this whole time. Why are we really going after this MacGuffin? Is it because we want to save people, or is it because we want to use these people in our fight against the Empire? Ultimately, I think it asks some pretty thought-provoking questions, and I like that it doesn't give any concrete answers to them either. Not only because it means that they can explore those questions further in the sequels, but also just because those questions don't really have any easy answers in real life either. Frankly, I was shocked by how often I found myself impressed by the narrative beats in this game. Something I found myself impressed by nearly constantly, though, was the visuals. The fidelity itself is about as good as I assumed it could get until I played Jedi Survivor, holy shit. But what really stood out to me was the lighting. If I had a nickel for every game in this video, you know that like, look, fill in the blank. The lighting is very striking and colorful and deeply saturated, and I really love that decision. It just makes every planet feel super distinct and alive. Also, I think they pretty much nailed all of the Star Wars iconography. The lightsabers and the blasters and the ships, they all look great and sound great. And I know that's not necessarily a point in favor of the game, considering they're just taking those things from previously existing material. But they did a great job adapting it into this space. Also, BD1. He is my best friend. Also, photo mode. Yes! The visuals are so excellent. Thank you for letting me take goofy pictures with them. I love you. I will say though, as much as I love the visuals, I do have one gripe with them. At times it can be incredibly difficult to tell what's just extra set dressing to make the environment look more detailed and what is actually the path forward or an interactable object. But that's kind of a minor gripe, and it didn't really kill my enjoyment of the experience overall. I think they do a Jetter Bob. What? So far, they've done a much better job in Survivor of making the path forward more distinct from just the set dressing. So it seems like even they understood that it was a problem. Because they're so cool and smart. I love you, Respawn. Please make Titanfall 3. Please. Ultimately, I had a pretty great time with Jedi Fallen Order. I mean, I did 100% the game. So you would hope so. The moment-to-moment gameplay is pretty stellar, and the combat is fucking excellent, and that goes for when you're fighting against someone else with a lightsaber or when you're fighting against someone without one. It's full of excellent action set pieces and jaw-dropping spectacle, though it does fall victim a little bit to the whole taking control away from the player to show a cinematic moment syndrome. But honestly, those moments are so few and far between that I wasn't really that upset when they happened. Like I said, I'm currently playing through Jedi Survivor, and I'm definitely not finishing that by the end of June, so that will be in the July video, hopefully. That game is really, really fucking big. And I don't just mean in terms of scale, I mean in terms of the amount of hard drive space it takes up. 150 gigabytes? Are you out of your fucking mind? I mean, the next game's only 400 megabytes, and it's a fucking masterpiece. Yeah, this is another one I don't own physically, so that'll do. I fear I am a bit late to the Pseudoregalia party, but I am here nonetheless. Pseudoregalia is a 3D platformer with a Metroidvania-style interconnected map. It bars your progress via lock and key mechanisms, whether that's literally just a lock and a key, or if it's a movement ability that you need to get somewhere. The game constantly encourages exploration, but more importantly, experimentation with the movement abilities it gives you. And it always feels rewarding to figure it out, because it doesn't just spoon feed you the solution to how to get everywhere. Oftentimes it will give you two abilities that may seem completely disconnected from each other, but the combination of the two is the only way you can progress through the game. I have no idea if the way I progress through the game is the way that I was even supposed to. And until I play through the game again or watch someone else play it, I won't know. And I think that's pretty freaking cool. The world is laid out in such a natural way that it never really felt like I was progressing through levels in a video game or like I was intentionally sequence breaking it. It always just kind of felt like I was going wherever I could and trying to figure out how to get where I couldn't. And therefore, it always felt extremely satisfying to figure out how to use these abilities together to get places that I previously couldn't access, or that I perhaps hadn't even thought I could access. And the excellence that is the overall world design is accompanied by perhaps the best movement mechanics I've ever used in a 3D platformer. And it does progression in much a similar way to Fallen Order, where the importance is placed less on the tools at your disposal and more on your knowledge of how to use them effectively. Also, moving around just looks cool as fuck. It's fluid and graceful, but it's also just dripping with this sort of intangible swag that I don't really know how to describe. It's just got that secret sauce. The overall art design is excellent, and I'm particularly impressed by the creature design and the costumes. I adore this PS1 N64 era aesthetic. It completely avoids the problem of visual clutter by just having the maps be composed entirely of disparate floating blocks and shapes. And honestly, I fucking love that. It also allows for some incredibly tight and satisfying platforming gameplay because you don't have to worry about making an environment make sense physically. At its best, the platforming feels like a tightrope walk where any mistake or misplay could have you starting over from scratch. So you're tensely chaining together your different movement abilities and trying to maintain enough momentum to make it to where you need to go. The castle itself starts out feeling extremely dreamlike and otherworldly, which is due in no small part to the excellent sound design and OST. By the end of the game, I was gliding around it like I knew it like the back of my hand. And despite that progression feeling incredibly rewarding, it was also very well paced. There was plenty of time after gaining each new ability to learn how to incorporate it into my current moveset before it threw another one on me. Returning to old areas with new abilities always felt super exciting because I might discover something that I didn't catch the first time, or that I wasn't capable of catching the first time. I feel like I could navigate a whole GTA 6-sized map with these traversal mechanics and pretty much never get sick of it. The movement is honestly quite a lot like the rest of the game, in that it delivers so much excellence in such a small package. But I come back to this game with a frequency I honestly didn't anticipate when I beat it. It's just kinda endlessly satisfying to traverse the world, to say hi to the little trumpet guys, or the ghost maids, or to just watch the main character absolutely fucking serve. You see this sitting pose? The healing animation? I could go on, but again, I'm trying to avoid specifics with these reviews, especially with this game, because I really think that if you haven't played Pseudoregalia, you ought to give it a try. It is just an airtight experience, and I'm very excited to see what the developer does next, because they clearly know how to make that fucking sauce, baby. Sonic. Aside from being a subpar fast food chain that a bunch of Southerners tried to convince me was better than In-N-Out, he's also a little blue guy who go real fast. I find it a little hilarious that I am now old enough to be nostalgic for Sonic Generations, a game that itself revels in the nostalgia of the previous generation's Sonic games. I played this game when it first came out, and I absolutely loved it, and now that I've replayed it as an adult, my opinion is different. I still definitely enjoyed my time with the game, but I wasn't as smitten with it as 11-year-old me was, and the flaws are quite a bit more noticeable. I'll start with the negatives and sort of build up to the positives as we go, which means we're starting by talking about 3D Sonic. Boost era 3D Sonic moves with all of the grace and fluidity of a Stegosaurus, and his homing attack can be relied on with about the same certainty as you can rely on, I don't know, a US politician to stop a fascist takeover of our government. Sorry, I didn't mean to get too woke on you there. Our democracy is being dismantled. It seems like even Sonic Team understood that 3D Sonic was really lacking, because even his levels are just a bunch of 2D sections kind of stitched together by the boost areas. And 3D, okay, I'm gonna call 3D Sonic fuck and 2D Sonic shit, because I'm tired of calling them 3D and 2D Sonic. Some of fuck's levels are better than others. Even the boost formula can't really fuck with something like City Escape or Green Hill Zone. But even in those cases, the shit levels are just better. By making a game where fuck and shit get to coexist and share the spotlight, really all Sonic Team did was prove how much better they are at making the 2D Sonic levels. Or sorry, the shit levels. And I know it may sound like I despise the 3D levels, because sometimes I do, but honestly, when they're at their best, it's actually a lot of fun. Mostly relying on the spectacle of just how fast he's going through the level, but honestly, it's pretty fucking cool when it works. But unfortunately, all of the fuck levels are kind of just bogged down by the unwieldiness and inconsistency of the controls, and no amount of awesome spectacle can really fix that. The mini-bosses actually work quite well because you're mostly on rails and can't really fuck it up.
I don't know where we are, nor do I care. This is where I finish you, Sonic.
But ultimately, the decision to stage stage the game around the dichotomy between the two Sonics really just makes it obvious how much fuck is getting upstaged by shit at nearly every opportunity. Because for the most part, 2D Sonic's levels are just a cut above. Despite the fixed 2D controls, the game actually plays around a lot with perspective and dimension. The levels don't feel like flat, straight lines to the finish. It feels like you're actually exploring a world despite only being able to move in two directions. I'm thinking particularly of Rooftop Run and Sky Sanctuary. They did a great job combining the moments of fast-paced spectacle with the more slow and methodic platforming challenges. There's also a shit ton of unique powers that will only appear for a level at a time, helping to give each level a unique sense of identity and personality.
But one of them is a skateboard, so the rest don't really need to exist.
Which is only helped by the excellent art and sound design and the fucking banging OST. The game bleeds vibrant colors right out of the screen and into your eyeballs, which makes the stark all-white hub world even more striking to return to between missions.
The game is very much front-loaded with all of its best levels, and the final boss is incredibly annoying more than anything.
I had a pretty great time with Sonic Generations. Mostly the shit levels. Those are pretty much fantastic across the board, whereas the fuck levels are quite a bit more hit and miss. I do also plan on giving Shadow Generations a shot just to see what Sonic Team has cooked up for like the coolest guy in the history of video games, or at least one of the coolest guys up there. I frankly don't even know where to start when talking about Halo. It's one of those franchises that has been around for so long that pretty much everyone has at least some passing knowledge of it. However, my friend Sal had never played any of the Halo games, and while I had played Halo 3 and ODST and Reach as a kid, it was pretty much entirely just the multiplayer and the custom modes. I think I may have played the campaigns of Halo 3 and ODST, but I have literally no memories of them. I did play Reach's campaign, and I do remember Reach. So, Sal and I have embarked upon a journey to play through every Halo game's campaign, that's included in the Master Chief Collection, co-op. And that of course started with Halo Combat Evolved. We already went into pretty significant detail discussing the missions in this game and putting them into a tier list. You can go watch this here video to see the highlights of our entire playthrough of the game, as well as the aforementioned discussion and tier listing of the missions. Also, I put a shit ton of effort into that video, so please go watch it. Please. 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 In a general sense, though, Halo is just another one of those games that feels really great to play. The gunplay is smooth and satisfying, and there's a significant amount of weapon variety so that it never gets stale either. Getting to ride a Warthog or a Ghost or a Banshee around a wide open expansive area and blasting a bunch of Covenant or Flood, it's truly an extraordinary experience. Going back to the first game is actually a rare case where I can pretty much immediately see why it became such an instant classic. Visually, the game also holds up incredibly well too, as long as you don't toggle on the anniversary graphics. It's incredibly, simple and primitive looking by modern standards, but it's just vibrant and full of character, and the simplicity definitely helps with that. The writing and voice acting here is also superb. I was always aware of Cortana and Master Chief and sort of their general relationship and vibe. But now I understand that Cortana is a fucking icon, and I am obsessed.
This ring isn't a cudgel, you barbarian. It's something else.
The narrative also just takes some interesting turns that I genuinely wasn't expecting and had me excited to find out more. It didn't feel like they were just phoning it in and making excuses for us to go shoot more things. Characters feel surprisingly well fleshed out given the game's short runtime and even shorter amount of time spent talking to them. Specifically, the relationship between Master Chief and Cortana is just fucking outstanding. There are so many brilliant little moments that display their chemistry and camaraderie and shared history in a way that doesn't feel like the game trying to shove it down your throat.
Pull up! Pull up! You did that on purpose, didn't you?
Also, this game might be the GOAT of weapon design. They are all so distinct and memorable, and they have so much personality baked into them. And on top of that, they function differently in gameplay too, giving you an actual reason to switch between them outside of just running out of ammo or wanting to experiment. I mean, the sniper, the shotgun, even the standard assault rifle, the plasma rifle, the plasma pistol, the fucking needler, I mean, the rocket launcher, it's ridiculous. It also has the greatest weapon in any video game ever, the Glock. They're all so satisfying and fun to use in their own unique ways, and it makes the gameplay never really feel stale. And you'll be swapping between them with such frequency that they'll all get a chance to shine at some point. So ultimately, despite its shortcomings, I still had a fucking blast with Halo. At the time of writing this, we've already begun Halo 2, and by the time of recording, we are continuing with it. And I'm streaming our playthrough on my Twitch, so be sure to go check that out, link in the description. That's right, the last game on the list was just a plug for my other videos. Please go watch the Halo video, though. I put so much work into it, please. So, those are all the games I played in May. I'm hoping that despite my incoherent ramblings, you were able to gauge... Why do you keep stop? At this point, I'm realizing I haven't played nearly as many games in June, so when I make that video, it's probably gonna be a little shorter, which is definitely for the best. If you want to see me talk about more shit, like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Also, I've been working on a Dark Souls video essay for like a year, so I'm hoping to get back to work on that soon as well. I really wish I didn't start so many things that I never finished, and I'm hoping that this is the start of a trend of actually finishing things. I guess this is probably where the outro...